Live from Fox 32 Chicago, it is election night in this city, the economic capital of the Midwest. I'm political editor Mike Flannery.
And I'm Natalie Bomke, excited to be with you here tonight. The polls have just closed about 2 minutes ago, and we expect to have some early numbers for you at any moment. How early are we going to get those numbers this time around, Mike?
Well, stay tuned. It was about 7:20, 7:22 last time. Let's go ahead and get the mood of the candidates. What do you think,
Okay,
Natalie?
let's do that. We want to check in with our live team in the field. Our team coverage starts tonight with Nate Rogers at Brandon Johnson's election night headquarters.
Yeah, that's right. Natalie, good evening to you. Right now we are inside of the Marriott Marquis, where Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson hopes to declare victory in just a couple of hours. Right now, the majority of people that you see here are journalists and crews finishing up last-minute setup touches. Now, Johnson visited some 13 locations throughout the city today, greeting voters. And even though recent polls show Paul Vallis in the lead, Johnson remains optimistic. His secret weapon along the campaign trail, aggressively working to win over progressives and young people. Johnson's critics question if he's qualified for the job, and after his own remarks, his doubters believe that he will defund the police department. Johnson, a former educator, teachers union leader, and now county commissioner, lives on the west side in the Austin neighborhood. He and his wife Stacy are raising their 3 children. Johnson says over the last 4 years, there have been 400 shootings in Austin alone. He plans to double the amount of young people hired by the city, devote more funding to mental health resources, and invest in underserved communities. Now, back out here live again as we speak, more people are filing in. One last thing to mention, today marks the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. As many know, King's son endorsed Johnson over the weekend, and part of his remarks, he said that if his father were here, he would definitely be supporting Brandon Johnson. It is the latest here inside of the Marriott Marquis. Nate Rogers, Fox 32, Chicago.
And I'm Dane Placco, live at Paul Vallis Election Night headquarters, where the doors opened just a few minutes ago and supporters are beginning to trickle in here. We are in the basement, a basement ballroom of the Hyatt Regency Hotel on East Wacker. We're told this room can hold about 500 people. I just looked outside earlier. There's a long line of people behind a security checkpoint waiting to get in here. This room should be filling up fairly fast. Now, we've also been talking to some of Vallis's campaign aides this evening and top staffers. They are generally optimistic about Vallis's chances of becoming Chicago's 57th mayor. Why are they optimistic? Well, they say it's just a matter of math. Many of the wards where turnout today was strong are also wards where Vallis did well in the primary election. In particular, let's take a look. The 2nd Ward, 19th, 41st, 42nd, 43rd, 44th, and 45th. We're all in the top 10 in terms of turnout by late this afternoon. They're all also Vallis strongholds. Those campaign aides tell me they believe the majority of the late mail-in vote will break in favor of Brandon Johnson, so they would need to see a lead of at least 50,000 or more before they would feel comfortable declaring victory this evening. Now, Vallis is here at the hotel with his family in a room upstairs. But this is interesting. His aides tell me he is not watching the returns come in. He doesn't like to do that. In fact, he's watching a movie tonight. That is his tradition on election night. He's watching a film and waiting for a knock at the door with the either good news or bad news. When that knock will come, will it be early this evening or will it be late into the night? Who knows? Live at the hotel downtown. Dane Placco, Fox 32 Chicago, Vallis headquarters. Back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Dane. Well, the election may be turned not only by how many voters turn out, but by who those voters are.
And Matt Podgorski is an expert election watcher with M3 Political Consulting. He's been a frequent guest, and I'm told that he needs to unmute his computer. He's been a frequent guest on Flannery Fired Up on our weekend programs. And just ahead of the February 28th initial round of voting for mayor of Chicago, M3 and Mr. Podgorski issued a voter opinion survey that nailed it almost to the 10th of a point for each of the key candidates, Matt. So you've been doing an exit poll. You've got 3,300 respondents so far. Tell us what you found in that exit poll. which was of people who had cast votes before today.
Yeah, good evening. That's right. We've been tracking on a daily basis, directly contacting folks that already voted and asking them who they voted for. Going into this weekend, Paul Vallis had a strong lead of a full 8 percentage points when you balance for and weight for demographics. He flipped and lost some votes this weekend. Brandon Johnson had his team had one really big push Saturday and Sunday and Monday, and that lead shrunk down to 1%. So going into today, Paul Vallis held a 1% lead with those who already voted. That included both in-person early voting and all of the vote-by-mail ballots that had already been returned.
So from your math, that's not enough. A 1% lead, Matt, for Vallis is actually, if that's the way it ends tonight, with still votes to come in, these vote-by-mail ballots, then that would be good news for Brandon Johnson that Vallis is only leading by 1 percentage point.
Yeah, and again, that was going into today, right? So the biggest chunk of votes comes in-person election day today. And so, in less than an hour, we're going to have a pretty good idea of how the in-person election day voting went. So Paul Vallis started with that 1% lead, which, it's better than nothing going into election day. Paul Vallis needs to win the in-person election day voting because, as you mentioned, Mike, Brandon Johnson, the assumption is Brandon Johnson's going to do well in the vote-by-mail ballots as a whole, which the exit polls show that, but especially in the vote-by-mail ballots that arrive late. The later ballots tend to be younger folks. Maybe they tend to procrastinate a little more. Maybe they are, a little more prone to a push at the end to come out and vote when they otherwise wouldn't.
Matt,
so
you've got those numbers up on the whiteboard there. You told us in the 5 o'clock news what they mean. Why don't you explain to people who've just tuned into the internet here from around the world and around the city what those numbers are?
Happy to do it. And these numbers are estimates, and they're a little bit fungible, right? They're going to change as the night goes on and throughout the week. But we made some assumptions. So we're assuming that the total turnout for this race, once all the ballots are counted a week from now, is going to be around 580,000 votes. We made another assumption that 48,000 of those 580,000 votes will not be counted and processed tonight. So when we go to bed tonight at midnight, we're expecting to see about 532,000 of those 580,000 counted and in the bank. That leaves 8.3% of the vote, or 48,000 votes, uncounted. As we talked about earlier, we think that Brandon Johnson has the edge on those late vote-by-mail ballots. And if you take an aggressive assumption and assume that Brandon Johnson wins 70% of those 48,000 votes that won't be counted tonight, that accounts for a net gain of 19,200 votes for Johnson. That's 3.6% of the votes we're going to be watching tonight. So for Paul Vallis to go to sleep tonight feeling really good about his campaign, he's going to want to see on TV that his raw vote lead over Brandon Johnson is greater than 19,200.
My goodness, it's hard to wrap my head around as a journalist because I'm no mathematician. So is there anything you learned, Matt, from the initial mayoral election that you can apply to the runoff?
Absolutely. There's in most elections, there's gaps, we call them, that you find in the crosstabs. Sometimes it's a gender gap, an age gap, a racial gap, an income gap, or an education gap. The biggest gap I found in the first round had to do with age. Brandon Johnson was running up huge pluralities, even majorities with the younger voters, whereas, Willie Wilson, Lori Lightfoot, and Paul Vallis were doing better amongst the senior voters. That has carried right over into the runoff. Yes, there is a racial gap where, Johnson's doing better amongst black voters. Paul Vallis is doing extraordinarily well amongst Hispanic voters, getting around 70% of their votes. And he is winning the white vote. But the biggest story is the age gap. Under 45, leaning toward Johnson. Over 45, leaning heavily towards Paul Vallis.
And that's why we saw those reports that members of the teachers union were actually at some of the high schools around the city were actually reportedly taking students of voting age to the polls, getting them registered and taking them to the polls.
Yeah, I mean, elections are becoming more and more of a mechanical exercise of logistics, of getting your people out to the polls, and less an influencing, a persuasion exercise. And we're seeing more and more of that. Even in nonpartisan elections, it was, only 10 or 12% of the folks were undecided right off the bat. And I think that universe keeps shrinking as you get closer, and it becomes an exercise of who can turn their people out more reliably.
So, Matt, let me ask you, you are also watching the 14 wards where we have aldermanic runoff elections taking place. Can you tell us what you're looking for there and how soon you might have some clues as to when we'll know? I was speaking to one of the candidates, one of the runoff candidates in a South Side ward, and he told me he expects to know, he thinks he'll know by 7:30 or 7:45 or so whether he has won tonight.
Yeah, so it's a little different with the wards because as a whole, when you average out the entire city, you're having a really close race, but you're seeing a really close race between Johnson and Vallis. The problem is it's hard to make inferences. Let's say 20 or 30% of the vote is reporting, at 8 p.m. It's hard to make inferences as to how that's going to land because we don't know which wards those votes are coming from. The Board of Elections doesn't report the ward details until the next day. And so because there's such a variety of demographics citywide, it's really hard to say, okay, 20% of the votes in, what does that actually mean? With an individual ward, they tend to be more homogenous. And so if you see 20 or 30% of precincts reporting within a ward, that's very likely to be representative of the entire ward. And so individual ward aldermanic races can be called much earlier than citywide races where you have such diversity from ward to ward.
I was seeing a report by the Sun-Times earlier tonight that they listed the top 10 wards with the most voter turnout, and then they were comparing that to those wards in comparison to what kind of candidate support they had. And they said Brandon Johnson only had 2 wards of those 10 that really would favor him, and his campaign saying that he remains optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Paul Vallis started out with that advantage for sure, where he had a majority, more majorities and more pluralities. What I will say is, and credit, as an observer in this race, credit to the Vallis campaign very early. They bought in, Brian Towns, the campaign manager for the Vallis campaign, they bought into an unorthodox ground game very early back in December, which was spearheaded by Mark Batnick and a young man named Adam Kenya. And it was called the Ward Tours. And it was, they literally sent, hand-addressed personal invites to tens of thousands of voters in every single ward, especially the ones where they knew they had to drive up turnout and lock people in early. And it was really successful. That's part of the reason why you saw Paul Vallis running up the score in that first round with 33% and giving him a boost to where instead of just solidifying his base in the runoff, he spent more time working on getting that next 17%. When you don't have those big gaudy numbers in the first round, Brandon Johnson had to shore up his progressive base, which cost him a couple $1 million in 2 weeks of campaigning.
Well, let's give Johnson some credit, though. If your exit polling is accurate, this thing is hanging on a razor's edge here. And even though Johnson's been outspent, that campaign has stayed right in the fight.
No doubt about it. It's a tough-fought campaign. Johnson was outspent with direct money. Look, this is a very progressive city. There's no doubt about it. And for a sort of a traditional centrist Democrat like Paul Vallis, it's an uphill battle to begin with demographically. We know that. I think they both run really good campaigns, really good ground operations, good TV. At the end of the day, like we talked about, it's really going to come down to the good old-fashioned logistics of mobilizing your voters and giving them a reason to come out and vote on this rainy, windy, thunderstorm Tuesday.
So
right.
if you could offer a critique, I guess, for each campaign, what would that one critique be that maybe they could have done better?
That's a tough one. I mean, I wouldn't say I was close enough inside either campaign to offer that critique. I think, if anything, you could always say woulda, coulda, shoulda. Mm-hmm. Both campaigns probably could have diverted some of their very expensive Chicago market TV money to turning out their base. which isn't as, it's not as interesting and exciting as running the TV commercials. But I think both campaigns got a little bit stir crazy when it came to trying to get those few undecided voters. It's very tempting, but I think, sometimes you have to be disciplined and say there really aren't that many undecided voters. We've got to spend more money convincing the 2/3 of voters, registered voters in Chicago, who don't vote in municipal elections. That's a lot of folks out there, and you really got to push them and find creative ways to get them to come out and vote.
It is almost scandalous that we're once again looking at 40% or below in terms of voter turnout. And your point being that getting just a small number of those people to the polls could make a difference in a race if, in fact, the margin is going to be that close. Well, listen, Matt Podgorski, why don't you stand by? We are expecting sometime in the next few minutes that
I believe we do have some early results.
Oh, do we have some numbers?
We can pull those up.
Let's take a look.
So we have Paul Vallis sitting at 53%, Brandon Johnson at 47%. And Mike, it looks like, is it 20-some percent? I need my glasses. 21% reporting so far.
Yeah, so this is the first tranche of votes, as you know, Matt Podgorski, and it's got Paul Vallis up by 6 points. That's certainly a number that Vallis would be happy with, but you think it's going to narrow, huh? The margins are going to get much closer before this is all done.
Yeah, again, really hard to say. I mean, based on the exit polling and the analysis I did, it looks like it's going to be a super close race. If that 20% is representative of the entire city, Paul Vallis is in a tremendous position because, like we talked about and did the math, that raw vote total, when you take that math and project it out to the 580, that would far surpass the 19,200. It'd be closer to 40,000 votes. So we'll see. We don't know where those 20% came from. But very, very, very early read. If I'm Paul Vallis, I'm happy. And we'll have to just check in every so often while we're hitting refresh on that Board of Elections page.
Right, and we're going to need either a pair of binoculars to read that monitor, Natalie,
or I'll have to get up and take a closer look.
Yeah, we'll
and
just
then
have to get up and walk next to the
Yes.
camera in order to see what those numbers actually.
Yeah, but a great breakdown and assessment of that, Matt. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
My
Thank you very
pleasure.
much.
Thanks
Stand
for
by,
having me, guys, and looking forward to.
Yeah, we'll give you a holler, and we may come back to you soon, Matt. Thank you very much for taking us through that.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your
And
time.
again, Matt Podgorski is an expert election watcher with M3 Political Consulting.
He did a great job of breaking that down. I want to kind of fast forward to what we may or may not see tomorrow, based on what we saw with Rahm Emanuel handing the reins over to Lori Lightfoot.
Yes, you will. As you remember from 4 years ago, Lori Lightfoot on this runoff election night easily defeated Toni Preckwinkle, and the very next morning, Mayor Emanuel had her in his office. The two of them met in the mayor's office. Lori Lightfoot, on that occasion, you remember on this night 4 years ago, she won all 50 wards. She won 2,000 precincts, lost only 20 precincts. She trounced Toni Preckwinkle thoroughly and completely. A spokeswoman for Mayor Lightfoot tells me tonight that the mayor has reached out both to Brandon Johnson and to Paul Vallis, and is offering to meet with them tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, whenever they want. Both campaigns have apparently told the mayor that they will get back to her. I suspect they don't want to do anything prematurely. They want to count the votes, watch the votes be counted like the rest of us, Natalie. And the mayor is promising a full and thorough accounting, a transition in which City Hall will be open to both of the candidates, rather to the winner and to their transition team. She's offering to cooperate completely with that.
And so people aren't confused out there. Whoever wins tonight is not going to take over immediately tomorrow. Can you explain the process?
Under state law, I've been told by a spokesman for the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners that the inauguration, per state law, would be on May 15th. I have seen some references at City Hall to to a swearing in of the new mayor on May 22nd. We're going to get that resolved, but apparently under state law, the new mayor's term begins on May 15th.
Okay, so that's when we'll see the transition occur. Let's talk about some of these aldermanic races as well. There are 14 wards that are being contested tonight, and some of them some pretty hot contests.
Yeah, and we do have some numbers here. In the 4th ward, which is where Sophia King, who ran unsuccessfully for mayor, is leaving her city council seat after 6 years. She was appointed by Mayor Mayoral in the middle of a previous term. Lamont Robinson, the state rep, has a pretty substantial lead there, just about double the votes of Prentice Butler. If we've got any other wards, put them up there, guys. Here's here's the neighboring 5th ward.
We have Desmond Yancey with 74% of the vote and Martina Hone with 26%.
That's pretty early, only 217 to 78 actual votes, but a thumping margin nonetheless, yeah.
And we'll just keep on kind of going through these here. We have William Hall and Richard Wooten in the 6th ward, 54% to 46%.
Yep. Now, this is another race there because of the mayor's race. The 6th ward was where Roderick Sawyer has been the alderman for some years. Peter Chico in the 10th ward. Peter is the grandson of John Chico, the former president of United Steelworkers, Local 65 there at the now defunct and abandoned U.S. Steel Southworks plant. He's got a pretty large lead over Ana Guajardo, 59% to 41%.
All right, and we want to take another look here at the mayoral tally so far, 53% to 47%. And it looks like we're still sitting at 21% of the votes counted. Yeah, and again, as Matt Podgorski was telling us, the M3 consultant, let's look at the actual total. Well, now here, a big jump. But Vallis still has about, well, it's about a 12,000 vote margin now. And what's the percentage there? It looks like it is 56%, Mike.
56%. So we have more than half the vote in. I suspect by 8 o'clock we're going to have a pretty good idea, Natalie. One of the candidates told me, you know, in one of the aldermanic candidates in a runoff ward told me, you know, there's only 2 contests on the ballot. 4 names. There's Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson, and then me and my opponent for alderman. So this thing is going to be, it's going to be like a pan of popcorn that pops pretty quickly once it gets going, and it's clearly going here. Okay, I want to circle back to, you know, Paul Vallis was doing well with the early voting, and we were, the day of voting, which candidate was going to do better with that? So what's the conventional wisdom? And again, I've seen the conventional wisdom be wrong as often as it's right, but the conventional wisdom is that of those going to the polls, that Paul Vallis would have an edge. Okay. And the question remains, will it be enough of an edge to let him build a lead bigger than what Matt Podgorski explained there? Because Brandon Johnson is just expected to sweep perhaps as much as 70% of the vote-by-mail ballots that will remain to be counted after tonight. And I mean, and they have until what, April 18th to count those ballots? 2 weeks from tonight. As long as your vote-by-mail ballot was postmarked today, and as long as it arrives by April 18th, it will be counted. All right, let's take a look at some more of those aldermanic races, if we can. I think we left off on the 10th ward. If we can move to the 11th now, so Mike. Here's the Daly family's historic home, which has been remapped to make it a majority Asian American ward. Nicole Lee, appointed by Mayor Lightfoot, has a substantial margin here. Is that 74% 74% of the vote in. Nicole Lee is opening up a wide lead, 64% to 36% over Anthony Ciaravino. Mr. Ciaravino is a Chicago police officer who teaches at the police academy. And he challenged the Daly family, which was backing Nicole Lee for a full term here. And right now, he's got a steep hill to climb. But again, if she wins, this could be historic. Yes. Well, it would be. She has been appointed as the first Asian American alderman. She would be the first Asian American to win a full 4-year term in the council. Very big news. Let's move on to one of the other wards that we're looking at. This is the 21st ward, Mike. Yep, and Cornell Dantzler has a lead. Wow, this one's, talk about razor-thin margin here, 51-49, less than 100 votes. Only 89 votes there. That's pretty doggone close.
I mean, and this is a true example of every vote counts, isn't it? You know, when you get out and you cast that ballot in your ward, this is what it amounts to, and it really does make a difference.
Right. This is a ward in the heart of the Black South Side, perhaps one that perhaps a contest that will drag on, and if it remains this close, we may have to wait until April 18th when all those mail-in ballots are counted.
All right, let's look at one of the other wards if we can here. A couple more to go. The 24th ward, we have Monique Scott with 68% of the vote and Creative Scott with 32%.
Right. It's
Scott versus Scott.
It's a Scott ward, yes. Monique is married to the former alderman who stepped down to take an education post, and the contest here looks to be going her way in the early going, and the percentage of the vote in is about, is that 30?
90%. Is that 50? 50%. I'm sorry.
All right,
okay, 50%.
Let's take a look at the next one now.
All right, this is the 29th ward. This is a big one.
Yeah, Alderman Chris Talaferro. He's a veteran Chicago police sergeant. He's been in the council for a number of terms, and C.B. Johnson, his challenger, is really running a very competitive race here. Talaferro had been a close ally, was a close ally of Mayor Lightfoot, had been an outspoken supporter of police reform, and as one of the members of the city council who was a longtime police officer, that carried some clout. Let's just show you the updated numbers here from the mayor's race.
66% reporting now, Mike.
Yep, and as you can see, it's now down to 51-49. And you'll remember what Matt Podgorski told us just a few minutes ago, that his exit survey of 3,300 voters indicated that these votes, and many of these are these early voting ballots, and these are vote by mail ballots that have been counted. Maybe we should even have Matt Podgorski come back briefly if he's available.
And the lockbox voting as well. I know that a lot of people utilize that, turning those mail-in ballots into the lockboxes and having those counted versus just mailing it in.
And so the percentage there is
looks like 66%, I believe.
66% in, and we've got a 2 percentage point margin for Paul Vallis here. His lead is a little less than 9,000 votes, about 8,700 votes.
Let's spend a moment discussing those early polls that were conducted. You know, a lot of people are like, I don't want to listen to that because, you know, we're 2 weeks out from Election Day. And really, they did yo-yo back and forth for each candidate. Now, the latest one, it did give Vallis, though, a pretty healthy lead, did it not?
Well, several of them did, but they were all within the margin of error. And one of the things that's misunderstood about polling is that the margin of accuracy or the margin of error, depending on how you want to use it. So if for example, in several of those surveys, Paul Vallis had a 4 percentage point lead with a margin of error of 3.5%.
It's close.
Actually, what that means is that Vallis could be down 3.5, Johnson could be up 3.5. So really, there could be a 7 percentage point swing there in the gap. So even a 4 percentage point lead was effectively a tie. And we are, with these latest updated returns here, we are getting, we're getting into that tie territory, that's for sure.
Okay, so these are two drastically different candidates. I mean, they are, when you look at it on paper here. So does it surprise you at all, the numbers that we're seeing, or did you expect a hefty lead kind of just, 30 minutes after the polls closed by one candidate or the other?
No, I think everybody inside, those on both sides here, felt this was a very, very close contest. And we've been saying that for the last several weeks. Indeed, as you noted, Natalie, there was that early surge of voting. 8 or 9 of the top 10 voting wards were were strongholds for Paul Vallis, but even in those strongholds, there are Brandon Johnson voters, and even in Brandon Johnson strongholds, there are Paul Vallis voters. So this indeed is why we count the votes.
And many undecided voters, too. You know, when you look at it and say, how can you be undecided? I mean, you have two very different candidates here. But I think that's all kind of showing in the numbers that we have right now.
Yeah. So they were, I was getting a message here. What was? All right. Matt Podgorski is back. So Mr. Matt from M3 Consulting, can you, there's your whiteboard.
I think he's probably
all right. Now he's back. Yeah.
In frame.
So about an 8,700 vote lead here for Paul Vallis. It's 51-49. What's your with about is about
two-thirds of the vote in. So
two-thirds of the vote in, Matt.
As many pollsters have said, this is looking like a razor-thin margin, and that's what it is. So you might be a few minutes ahead of me. You said an 8,900 vote lead.
Yeah, so we got 182,439 to 173,711. And, you know, if my math is not too far off, that's between 8,000 and 9,000 votes. Yep. And that's the
87-28. Yeah, 87-28 with 2/3 of the precincts reporting, not counting this 48. So like we talked about, I mean, these are conservative numbers if you're Paul Vallis. They're aggressive numbers if you're Brandon Johnson. This is what the lead, you want the lead to be or bigger if you're Vallis. If you're Johnson, you're hoping that the lead ends up over there. It's a little under halfway there. Now, Paul Vallis doesn't need to have a 19,200 vote lead to win. He needs to have that to be able to sleep well tonight. It is possible that that lead could be as small as 10,000 votes and still hang on. It really depends on how many of these ballots, these 48,000, late ballots will come back. You know, will it be 52,000? Will it be 38,000? And then, of course, at what rate will Brandon Johnson win those late-breaking mail ballots? We put assumptions in of 70% to 30%. You know, if that's off, these numbers change. So to feel comfortable, he wanted to be up 19-2, but theoretically, he could get away with a 9,000 or 10,000 vote margin.
Yeah, and look, I appreciate your joining us this evening, and I think we have to. If I had a hat, I would tip it to you because you were calling this. With your exit survey of those who had already voted up through yesterday, you thought the differential was about 1 percentage point, and here we almost are.
0.2. I believe the prediction I sent you was that Vallis would end up winning after all the votes are counted by 0.2%. So
that's
I don't know.
Maybe that's breathingly close.
If it comes to that, this is going to be fought out in court.
Heat.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Here you go. Here you go, Matt. If you can see,
82% reporting, 50% to 50%.
Yeah. And
2,441 vote margin. It looks like
Vallis has a lead of about 441 votes.
Oh, I've got 2,441. Do I maybe have different numbers?
2,000. Yes, I'm sorry.
2,441.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's and then what percentage reporting is that?
82%.
81%. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We got to watch it real close. We also need to get an update from the Board of Elections on what their best estimate is as to this number here. This is an assumption based on information from the Board of Elections and projections. If this is high, if the real number is lower than this, it favors Vallis. If it's higher, it favors Johnson. So it looks like a real nail biter.
Now, I know at some point I know you want to take a break and get on the phone. I mean, there are some of these neighborhoods that we identified earlier as kind of swing neighborhoods, and some of those North Lakefront, North Side wards where Brandon Johnson, that the only place Brandon Johnson won wards in the first round was up on the north side, and would 32, would 44 be up for grabs? Would they give us a sense of how this thing might be going? But with still about what percentage is reporting
82%?
now? 82% of the vote in. This is going to be a nail biter, huh?
Yeah. Again, I mean, at this point, right this minute, gosh, I mean, I suppose it could be Brandon Johnson's maybe feeling a little bit better. But sure, just 10 minutes ago, Vallis was feeling better. So, or at least he would be if he knew, but he's watching
the movie,
right?
we were told. Dane Placco reported he's watching
I
a
ran
movie.
for Cook County
Chariots
Commissioner,
of Fire.
as you know. Yeah, I ran for Cook County Commissioner just this last fall, and I should have done that. I was, a nervous wreck watching the returns. I ended up going to sleep with a lead of 1,200 votes.
I think most people, that's probably what most people do. But
Yeah.
I mean, to me, this speaks to a city divided. It does. Because like I said earlier, you have two very different candidates. And there's not an agreement on who we want to. Now, not everybody got out and voted, but who we want to lead the city. And both candidates have said, look, I don't care if you voted for me or not. I'm going to be, the great unifier for the city that maybe Lightfoot was not. So how do you move forward if you are the next mayor? And these are the vote totals we're seeing so far.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I covered 1983 and 1987, those mayoral contests before both of you were born, probably. But they 90% or so of Chicago voters turned out in those two contests. It was both of them were won by Harold Washington. You talk about a city divided, that was, and the racial polarization that's not present in this contest. And you can just see it from the fact that so relatively few people are actually casting ballots. You wonder if we had a 90% turnout, what would the result be? Maybe a landslide for Johnson or maybe a landslide for Vallis. There is a book out there called The American Non-Voter, and the suggestion, the researchers found, according to that book, guys, that people don't vote because they are happy with the way things are going. I don't think that's the case here. I think in a lot of parts of the country, perhaps that's the case. Or, more often, it was what I hear here, people don't think their vote's going to lead to any real change. What do you think about that, Matt? When you talk to non-voters, what do they tell you?
I have a somewhat biased opinion. I think, I've seen some study done years ago that said that, if you forced everyone to vote who doesn't vote, 90% of them would vote, for the Democratic Party over the Republican Party. The question is, would they be on the more progressive side or the moderate side? I'm not so sure. I think there's a tremendous amount of apathy out there. I haven't read the book. I think, the non-voter in our case is a little bit different. They're a voter in Chicago. They just don't vote in municipal elections. The turnout is pushing 70%, high 60s or 70% in presidential elections.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah.
But then when you move to municipals, it's in the 30s. And so there's almost three categories of people. There's people that, never vote, which is like your 30%. There's people that vote only in the highest profile races, right? That's your 70% turnout. And then there's the ones that are really dedicated. They'll vote in everything. They'll vote in primaries, municipals, dog catcher, special elections, and everything. Right. So I think you kind of have to segregate those and not lump them all together.
So Matt, we're gonna give you a break here. We're gonna let you get on the phone, maybe identify where some of these votes are still out, because that'll tell us something. And we'll let you take a break. We're going to talk a bit about the Naperville mayoral contest. Yeah, a big mayoral contest there
that could be history-making.
Where Benny White is running, hoping to become the first black mayor of Naperville. He's a retired military officer, I think lieutenant colonel, running against Republican former state representative Grant Worley. That's Benny White there. He's been on the Naperville City Council for several years. Bidding to become the first black mayor of that western suburb that stretches into parts of DuPage County and Will County. It has become one of the largest cities in Illinois.
Yeah, so it'll be exciting to see when those numbers are finally in. We want to head back out to Nate Rogers, who is with the Brandon Johnson campaign tonight. And boy, these numbers, Nate, 50% to 50%. I'm sure there's a lot of excitement in the room.
That's right, guys, indeed. Right now we're live inside of the Marriott Marquis where Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson is hopeful to declare victory sometime soon. You got about 1,800 people that are expected here tonight. Right now the room is filling up as we speak. Joining me now, 20th Ward Alderman Jeanette Taylor. You've known Brandon Johnson some 20 years, right?
20 years.
Talk about who's in the room right now. I'm seeing a lot of teachers. I'm seeing just everyday citizens who really want Brandon to win.
You have seen people who've been struggling for 20 years to make sure that we create legislation and policy that helps everybody and doesn't hurt anybody. And so you got teachers, you got organizers, you got young people, you got the elders, you got everybody here tonight. And this is what reflective of what Chicago is.
Yes. Just looking at the totals right now, it's neck and neck. What is going to get Johnson over the hump?
Young people and old black Chicago. We need them Harold Washington folks who love Harold to come out, and young people who inspire us and gonna fix what we ultimately messed up. We need them to come out in groves. Sure. So that's how we'll make it over.
Sure, and Alderman Taylor, I've got to ask, just do you think that Johnson's message has been clear in terms of that whole defunding the police situation, whatever he meant by it? I know he was trying to clean it up, if you will, but do you think it's resonating with Chicagoans that he will not defund the police?
Absolutely, but let's be clear. When you look at studying data, people love talking about data. It says what you invest in is what you believe in. And so we invest in just policing. That's not what we believe at Chicago. There's not a one versus the other. It's an and but. And so we got to have some real accountability. Let's not act like that the Chicago Police Department hasn't killed the most people in the United States history. Like that's their own data. It's not mine. And so we got an issue that we need to rectify. But the issue has been they're not at the table when we make a lot of these decisions and we talk about what their duty is. And so this is an opportunity for us to get it right and do it right. People who we make decisions about should be at the table at every standpoint. I don't care what they make. I don't care what they look like. I don't care where they come from. They need to be at the table. And the Brandon Johnson administration will make sure that happens. Sure. I'm quite sure.
Tell me what sets him apart.
He hasn't backed away from who he is and what he's done. When they came out with the water bill, because the water is too damn high. How many people are cut off? At least him and his wife can get in a position where they could get it. But if it's too high for a Cook County commissioner, just imagine it anywhere else. Sure. There's a home in my ward selling for $934,000. As an elected official, I cannot afford it. We want people to stay in Chicago, but we continue to price them out. And so we got to have somebody who has the political will to say, we're not going to up fees and fine. No, we're not going to add. We're not going to sell the parking meters. We got people, we're not going to usher in charter schools because they ain't doing no better than the elementary schools. And so somebody who takes a stand and says, hey, this is not going to happen on my watch, I will not support it. And so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Alderman Taylor, thanks so much. Really appreciate you. Well, you heard it here again. Folks here still coming in, filing in as we speak again. Some 1,800 supporters of Brandon Johnson expected here right now. We do believe that he's entering the building if he's not here already. Of course, as soon as he hits the stage, we'll be sure to let you know. And there's the latest here in the South Loop. Nate Rogers, Fox 32, Chicago.
Thank you, Nate. And we want to send it now over to our colleague Dane Placco, who is covering the Vallis campaign. Dane.
Yeah, it is a close one. Less than 2,400 votes at the latest report separating the two candidates right now, with about 81% of the votes counted. And we're at Vallis headquarters, and there is a lot of people looking a little bit worried around the room. Still a lot of good feelings here, a lot of people talking, meeting, a lot of political types here. But this is clearly not what they were expecting to see. I think, first of all, everybody's surprised that I've talked to about how quickly this vote is coming back. To have 4/5 of the vote back within about 40 minutes, 45 minutes from the polls closing is a remarkable feat. And then they're also a little bit surprised at how close it is. I mentioned in some of our earlier reports, talking to some of his campaign aides earlier today and people that specialize in breaking down numbers for the campaign, they were feeling fairly confident about Vallis's chances tonight, especially because he was getting a lot of numbers, a lot of votes were coming out of some of the wards where he was expected to do very well and had done very well in the primary. I did talk to 27th Ward Alderman Walter Burnett a short time ago. We're going to play a little bit of that for you in our next report, but he, to recap, told me that he's still feeling good about what's happening right now. He said he believes it is going to be a very close race. He said the people who voted for Vallis in the 27th Ward in the primary definitely unfortunately came out for him in the same numbers he believes in the general election. There were also some votes in his ward for Willie Wilson. He said he believes those votes broke the Vallis, but that may not be the case based on what we're seeing right now. So, about 300-400 people here at Vallis campaign headquarters. We are in a ballroom at the Hyatt Regency on East Wacker, and there are still people coming in as we speak. We are told that Vallis is upstairs in a hotel room with his family, not watching the results, we're told, because he likes to watch a movie on election night. That is his tradition. He likes to simply be told when it's time for him to speak, good or bad. There will be a knock at the door. That's the way it's always been done, but with the numbers this tight, you have to believe that maybe he's putting that movie on pause and checking in on the election results. Back to you.
I think you're probably right, Dane. My guess is somebody's in there. Get a load of this, boss. But
yeah, he's not on the edge of his seats like we are. We want to take another look at those numbers. 87% reporting.
87% in, and the margin is less than 400 votes. It looks to me like it's about 370 votes. And again, I bring you back to what our consultant and pollster Matt Podgorski told us. For Paul Vallis to go to bed tonight feeling good, he wanted a lead of 19,200. So we're about 18,800 votes away from that. This is, if it were to close the night as close as it is right now, Natalie, the guy who could go to bed feeling pretty good and get a good night's rest is Brandon Johnson.
All right, let's take a look at some of those other ward races that we've been following. There are 14 wards having runoff elections tonight, and we want to circle back to the 30th ward, Mike.
Yeah, the 30th ward, Ruth Cruz has a lead here of several hundred votes over Jessica Gutierrez. She is the daughter of former Congressman Luis Gutierrez.
And 100% of the votes in at this point.
100% of the votes in, so she appears to have won, Ruth Cruz, although once again, these ward results, just like the citywide results, may await April 18th for a final decision when all of the mailed-in ballots are counted. But right now, Ruth Cruz certainly looks to be in a good spot over the daughter of former Congressman Luis Gutierrez, who was the first Hispanic member of the Illinois congressional delegation, Natalie.
Okay, let's look at some of these other wards if we can. The 36th ward.
Gil Villegas, the chair of the City Council Hispanic Caucus, Latino Caucus, has a substantial lead, and the percent of the vote that's in is
81%.
81%, 58-42 over Leonor Lori. She also goes by Lori Torres-Witt. She is a member of the Chicago Teachers Union Executive Board. The Teachers Union put a lot of resources and a lot of energy into this campaign in the 36th ward. 50% of this ward is brand new for Gil Villegas. He famously did not like the way Mayor Lightfoot and her allies in the city council were conducting the remap of the city council. So they said, "Oh yeah, buddy?" They slapped him around and they gave him a ward. I'm told that it's 8 miles from end to end.
My goodness.
It's a bean. It's a shoestring, but 50% of the precincts have been represented by Villegas in the past.
And it looks like he's going to squeak this one out tonight.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, I'd rather be Gil Villegas than Lori Torres-Witt.
Okay, let's look at some of the other wards if we can. All right, the 43rd ward.
This is the Silk Stocking Lincoln Park neighborhood, and Timmy Knutson, a gay rights activist and a financier and attorney.
A Lightfoot appointee as well.
Lightfoot appointee. The longtime incumbent there, Michelle Smith, stepped down. Knutson with a lead of several hundred votes over Brian Comer.
And 96%
who is the president. Yeah, 96% in. So that's looking pretty good for Knutson. Comer is the president of the Sheffield Neighbors Association, one of the larger and more active neighborhood groups in the Lincoln Park area. This one once again favoring Mr. Knudsen.
All right, let's look at, I think there's a few more to go, so if we can just kind of run through those. This is the 45th Ward, Mike, 100% reporting.
Up on the northwest side, and the controversial James Gardner, the alderman there, who has been accused of bullying and of improperly using his office. He's got a pretty good sized lead over Megan Mathias, and that's once again with we're getting close to the end. Once again, we have to emphasize some of these wards may have more mail-in ballots than others. Those will still be counted as long as they arrive by April 18th.
Okay, let's look at the next ward if we can. I think we have one or two left, right? This is the 46th ward. This is a hotly contested race.
Yeah, this is Uptown. This is one of those north side, north lakefront wards that Brandon Johnson carried, and Angela Clay, the progressive candidate there, has a lead over Kim Walls. That at this point looks pretty substantial with the returns.
Looks like 91% reporting.
Wow. So you'd certainly want to, at this point, be Angela Clay rather than Kim Walls. This is a ward that Brandon Johnson carried in the first round of voting.
Is that the last ward, or is there another one? They're at the 48th.
Here we are, Lenny Mana Hoppenworth. She's got, a narrow lead over Joe Dunn, but it's a 50-50 tie,
right, 94%
percentage-wise.
reporting.
94, so that's one. Let's wait till that final 6% gets counted, and then the mail-in ballots. Wow, that's going to be, that's a close one.
So you can see why these are
That's
runoff.
in the Edgewater neighborhood.
Thank you, Mike. You can see why these are runoff races because they are so close. I mean, they're once these mail-in ballots are counted, I mean, it could go either way.
Right. And Mana Hoppenworth is a photographer up in the 48th Ward along the North Lakefront, just north of Uptown. And Joe Dunn works for a housing construction company, a development company. And wow, 50-50, man.
Okay, let's circle back to the mayoral race if we can. We're waiting on some updated numbers here, but right now it looks like 87% reporting still, 50% to 50%. Mike, and I know you spoke earlier about I don't want to age you, but the decades of mayor's races in Chicago that you have covered. And do you recall one that was this close at this point?
Yeah, we've had some close ones. Of course, it was a three-way contest in 1983 in that Democratic primary back before these became nonpartisan. Before Chicago mayor races became nonpartisan in 1995. And in that 1983 Democratic primary, we had to wait for all the votes. That was a late night before it became clear that Harold Washington had edged out Jane Byrne and Richard M. Daley. Daley, it was clear in the evening, earlier in the evening, it was clear that Daley was going to finish third, but we had to wait till late to see for sure that Harold Washington had defeated Jane Byrne.
Okay, so let's say everything's said and done tonight, and we still don't have a distinct winner. What happens next?
Well, we sit and count all the votes. That's Matt Podgorski told us perhaps 48,000 votes are yet to be counted in the vote by mail returns, and it is expected, and again, maybe that won't happen, but it is expected that Brandon Johnson will win in those vote by mail ballots that are yet to be counted. And if he does, he'd have to make up only a few hundred votes here in order to become the next mayor of the city of Chicago.
So an exciting night here in the city. I know the entire nation has their eyes focused on our city tonight, seeing who's going to come out on top.
Well, it was fascinating to me that Joe Biden was clearly paying attention at the White House when the first round of voting concluded here, because there was a controversial bill relating to the District of Columbia pending in Congress that had been sent. Actually, a lot of Democrats voted for it in the House and the Senate. It was on Joe Biden's desk. It was thought that he was going to veto it. It was related to getting tough on crime. After Lori Lightfoot was defeated in that first round on February 28th, when crime, violent crime on the streets of Chicago, and the huge increases we've seen in the 4 years since she was sworn in as mayor, the president ended up vetoing that, signing that bill rather, and not vetoing it as many people thought he would. He had, and it was widely believed that he was responding to the vote both in New York City, where Eric Adams became mayor on a tough on crime platform, and then the defeat of Lightfoot, who was perceived, rightly or wrongly, as not being tough enough.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. And we've got our live team coverage continuing here on Fox 32. We're going to stay with you for a little bit longer here on the web, and then we're going to reboot, and then we'll come back with some fresh results. But any big surprises tonight so far? Is this pretty much falling into place where you thought it would?
Well, I've been in touch with Matt Podgorski as he's been doing this exit polling that sampled 3,300 people, and then if you'll remember that when he crunched all the numbers, he thought in the end, after it's all said and done, that Paul Vallas might win by 0.2 of a point. But he acknowledged that that's within the margin of accuracy, the margin of error, so it's a coin toss. And right now, from those numbers that you see on your screen, if you're at home, pull out a quarter, a dime, a penny, and toss it up.
I mean, that really is something, because reporting on these numbers the last several weeks, to be honest, I thought that we would have a clear winner. I didn't think that it would be this close tonight.
Yeah, well, many people felt that way. We've been reporting that it's really that it was likely moving in this direction. And over the weekend, I mean, one of the things that Matt Podgorski found over the weekend was that the teachers union and the others in support of Brandon Johnson, who of course is a longtime organizer for the union and lobbyist, they really got their people to the polls this past weekend. He told me that he thought that over Saturday and Sunday that maybe Johnson got as much as 62% of those early votes. And there were days when Paul Vallas, earlier in the early voting process, was winning. And now we see Brandon Johnson takes the lead here by 1,100 votes.
And 88% reported.
88% in, and Brandon Johnson, for the first time tonight, has taken the lead. So if it remains this close, you're going to have to suggest that maybe Paul Vallas is going to fall short here, and Brandon Johnson may be the next mayor of Chicago.
I've got goosebumps. This is getting so good, Mike.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to turn away.
Folks, put some more popcorn. Put some more popcorn on, and stay tuned. This one's going to be a nail biter, and maybe we won't have a clear winner or loser tonight. Maybe we'll have to wait a few days for that.
Yeah, and this is really going to be such a dramatic change for the city of Chicago, really, whoever takes over. Dramatically different from what we've seen the past 4 years.
So although Brandon Johnson had been an outspoken supporter of defunding the police, campaigns have an impact, and they make people change their mind. Johnson now says he isn't going to cut the police budget. He said during our debate right here in this studio, the Vallas-Brandon Johnson debate that we held here, he said that the police department's nearly 2,000 vacancies, he said, obviously, those vacancies have to be filled. And when I followed up on that, his campaign told me that he does intend to hire, but it's obviously going to take a while to do that. And for his part, Paul Vallas also embraced many of the things that Johnson and Lori Lightfoot have been talking about, including spending a lot more money on violence interruption, the kind of thing that Arnie Duncan's Chicago Cred has been doing. And it was Vallas's commitment to do that kind of spending that was the reason that Arnie Duncan endorsed Paul Vallas.
All right, we want to reset here. So thank you again for joining us. We are live from Fox 32 with all of your hot off the griddle election results. I'm Natalie Bomke.
And we mean hot.
And we mean hot. And this is Mike Flannery, our political editor. We have team coverage for you here tonight, and we've got two of our colleagues covering two of the most important campaigns, I'm going to say, in the nation tonight. One of them is Dane Placco, and he is standing by at the Vallis campaign. And I'm sure that, boy, there's a lot of nails being bitten right off there, Dane.
Yeah, a lot of tension in the room right now. You can certainly say that. We are at the Hyatt Regency on East Wacker in a big ballroom, 400 supporters for Paul Vallis. But the news not looking so good right now. As you just mentioned, Brandon Johnson taking the lead with about 100 votes, with 88% of the vote counted. We're joined by 44th Ward Alderman Tom Tunney. You've been supportive of Mr. Vallis. You endorsed his campaign. What is your reaction right now to these numbers?
Well, we all knew it was going to be a nail-biter, so we'll see. It really has to do, hopefully, with the organizational skills for each campaign. Mm-hmm. You know, how can they get their vote out, how they're early voting, you know, how to get people energized. I think the differences is so stark, you know, on the platform. So I honestly, I'm so much more with Paul because I think he has the seasoned experience to take the city forward on day one. Whereas I'm not confident in Brandon Johnson.
You're not surprised it's this close, though.
Well, you know, I was on the team, so we knew daily that things were getting tight, and then, you know, there was a mishap with the Johnson campaign over finances that, you know, we don't know where that was going, and you know, but you know, that's the dynamics of a big campaign like this. It wavers every day.
Well, you know politics as well as anybody in this room. Do you think there's any way we're going to have a winner tonight?
I don't know. I don't see it because there's still basically 100,000 votes out that are not back from vote by mail.
Right.
They assume that probably 50,000 of those will not come back because they need to be postmarked, you know, today. So, you know, it'll probably come down to those mail-in votes.
And the conventional wisdom that I've been hearing, even from people in Vallis's campaign, is that they expect Brandon Johnson will probably have the advantage in those late arriving mail ballots.
Well, look, we had spring break for families, we had Jewish holidays, and COVID. So let's hope that we're on the right side of history with Paul Vallis. How about that?
Okay. Tom, thank you very much.
My pleasure, always.
All
okay,
right.
thank
Tom,
you.
Good to see you. 44th Ward Alderman Tom Tunney acting as one of the campaign surrogates here tonight. And maybe we can, if I step back for just a second, Jeff can pan a little bit to the right and show the crowd here at Vallis headquarters. A large crowd, probably, like I said, 300 or 400 people. Certainly not as enthusiastic as they were when they started coming in here about an hour ago. I don't want to say people look stunned, but they're certainly watching the numbers on television, and you can see by the looks on their faces, they are not happy with what they're seeing right now. It would, as Tom Tunney just said, I can't see how we get a definitive answer on the next mayor of Chicago tonight, given how close this race is right now and how many mail-in ballots are still out there. Again, the conventional wisdom being that Brandon Johnson will do better with the mail-in ballot, but who knows? At this point, it's anybody's game. Throw it back to you guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Dane. And boy, he said it. I mean, I think that a lot of people like, whoa, you know, really shocked with what is unfolding in front of our eyes.
Well, and it's let's give credit where credit is due. I mean, the Chicago Teachers Union and their affiliates and their parent groups, the Illinois Federation of Teachers, the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, the national president, they poured millions and millions of dollars into this campaign. And it was an audacious move to put an organizer for the teachers union directly into the contest.
And you know, I was speaking to a friend
to run
today,
City Hall.
And to that point, I was speaking to a friend today who said I hadn't heard of this Brandon Johnson before the mayoral race, and so you know that was a big risk, and it appears to be paying off so far.
Yep. And as you can see the numbers there with Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallis virtually tied at 50-50. Johnson has a slight lead of over 1,000 votes, about 1,100 votes there. And
illustrating that lead is going to be our colleague Nate Rogers, who is live with the Brandon Johnson campaign.
A lot of excitement there, Nate.
Oh, guys, and literally just in the last 5 seconds, as I was waiting for y'all to come to me, there was just this roaring applause from people in the room. Todd right now is going to shift the camera just to my left so you all can see people in front of the monitors right now. There are folks that are cheering, folks that are clapping, crying. And in this room right now, we see educators, we see lawmakers. I'm standing along one of the state senators here in Illinois right now. How excited are you, sir?
This is an epic moment. You know, I think about it. 40 years since Harold Washington beat Bernie Epton, we have a unique opportunity to do that here in Chicago. We have a unique opportunity to have a positive vision that gives us a better, stronger, safer city. A positive vision so that no matter what zip code you live in, northwest side, south side, north side, southwest side, east side, that you get the light that you deserve. Instead of having a candidate who looked down on people, we had a candidate who said, let's lift people up. That's Brandon Johnson, someone who's going to lift us up. And so, as someone who's a supporter of Brandon, know Brandon before we were both elected, has seen him as an organizer, has seen this movement, we have a unique opportunity in Chicago to go on the world stage and say Chicago is back, baby.
Let's talk about how Brandon Johnson was able to get ahead. I mean, one of the talking points that I think has resonated with a lot of young people is that point where he said something like, right away, I want to double the amount of young people being hired by the city of Chicago. Do you believe, Senator, that resonated with a lot of families here?
Yeah, I mean, instead of running a campaign on the negative right-wing, tough on crime talking points that you saw from his opponent, Brandon said we need to invest in people. That when you think of the safest cities, they invest in people. He said young people need jobs. We need to make sure that they have jobs, that they have opportunity. He said that if you have a neighborhood, that they deserve a neighborhood school. That if you need food, you have a grocery store. That if you need to be able to get from point A to point B, that you can do that in a reliable transportation and you can do it safety. One candidate presented public safety for all, and the other candidate said a public safety for a few. Brandon Johnson is the mayor for Chicago for all, for everybody, to make sure that Rogers Park, Hyde Park, Garfield Park, Humboldt Park, that everybody has a safe and just and dignified life.
Sure. Not only have Johnson's critics talked about him wanting to defund the police, but they've also feared, if we can be real here, that he may be a puppet for the teachers union. How do we know that he will be able to maintain those same mission that he's talked about throughout the campaign trust? Why should Chicagoans trust Brandon?
Well, let me first say, his opponent was the hand-picked negotiator for the FOP. His opponent defunded public schools in New Orleans, Philadelphia, in Connecticut. At the end of the day, the choice here is someone who's been honest about who they are and someone who's gone around from city to city and has failed continually over and over again.
Yeah. Finally, let me just ask really quick, what is going to be his greatest challenge? If, in fact, he wins the majority vote tonight, if we're able to call it, what is going to be his greatest challenge?
Well, we saw it in '83. He's going to have to bring people together, and they got to be committed to this positive vision. We know that there are going to be people who are hostile to this movement, but you know what? We're going to work through it. We're going to organize. And like '83, we're going to build some power. We're not going to have no Vidoliak 29 in 2023.
Thanks so much, Senator People. Thank you, man. That's right, guys. Well, you've heard it here from one of the Illinois state senators. More people still filing in. They say they plan to have some 1,800 supporters in the room. We do know that Brandon Johnson has entered the hotel. We're not sure just yet when he will take the stage, but everyone is still gathered around all of the monitors watching those results trickle in right now. As we mentioned at the top of this, we're meeting a lot of people, everyday citizens, from teachers to many police officers are here. A lot of students are here. And as we said when we were talking to the senator, many of the young people are excited to hear that he wants to offer a lot of jobs to those young people. One of the things we asked Brandon Johnson earlier is how soon will he be able to get those jobs up and running? He says as soon as he becomes the mayor of the city of Chicago. That's the latest here at his campaign headquarters. Nate Rogers, Fox 32, Chicago.
All right, thank you, Nate. We heard there from State Senator Peters, who, if there's a Brandon Johnson parade, that state senator is the grand marshal, the ringleader of that parade. He's been on board with that campaign for quite a while. But, I mean, Mike, I think we can all agree that everyone deserves equal access in Chicago. And the long list of things that Johnson is promising to voters and to Chicagoans, we're all for. But he's also proposing an $800 million tax increase. And that's
$800 million.
$800 million tax increase. That's a big pill for people to swallow.
That's why we're paying some attention also to these 14 runoffs in the city council. I will say, Frank Calabrese, a young man we've we've had on in the last few weeks, who is a number cruncher, political consultant. He just texted me, we are not calling it. We're not calling it, but Mr. Calabrese suggested he thinks that Brandon Johnson wins. So we'll see what's happening there. We do have, I think we've got Matt Podgorski standing by.
And the last time we checked in with Matt,
we'll get back to him in a minute.
And we'll kind of set this up here. Let's set this interview up. So we're at about 88% of the votes reporting, but there's still a lot of mail-in ballots that are outstanding. So the last time we spoke with Matt, he was going to make a couple calls to see where these outstanding votes lie, to see if maybe we could get our finger on the pulse of which way the remainder of those results could go.
Yeah, let's, yes. And so I tell you what, I'm being told let's run through the aldermanics. Do we want to start with
yeah, let's start from the very beginning.
Fourth Ward,
okay, the fourth ward, and we have
former
14
mayoral
wards.
candidate Sophia King's ward, where she's stepping down. She stepped down to run for mayor. Lamont Robinson, a state lawmaker, appears to be in good shape there, 67% to 33%, although that one is not quite, we don't have quite as many reporting. In the 5th Ward, right next door to 4, Desmond Yancey has a pretty good-sized lead over Martina Hone there. Well, just several hundred votes, 52% though to 48%, a 4-point margin. And in the 6th Ward, where Roderick Sawyer left a city council seat to run for mayor, William Hall, again with in the 70s, a little more than 70% in, 60% to 40%. That's a pretty good-sized margin for him. And in the 10th Ward, the former steel mill district down on the far southeast side on the Indiana border, right along State Road there, we've got Peter Chico, the grandson of a steel union president down in that neck of the woods, with a thumping margin, a thumping lead over Anna Guajardo. And in the 11th Ward, where Nicole Lee was appointed by Mayor Lightfoot as the first Asian American member of the city council, again with
91% reporting.
91% in. She's in very good shape over Anthony Chiaravino, 62 to 38. And in Ward 21, Ronnie Mosley has a narrow lead over Cornell Dantzler. And again, we've
90%.
Yeah, we've got a lot of the vote in there. Not many votes still out. But that is one that we may wait for all of the mail-in ballots to arrive.
All right, let's get to the next ward if we can. Ward 24, Mike.
Yeah, 24, Monique Scott versus Creative Scott. She's got a thumping lead there, no doubt about that.
And this is what we're doing. We're building for a dramatic pause. That's why we're waiting.
We are.
Now the 29th
here's
ward.
where incumbent, in the West Side 29th Ward, incumbent Chris Talaferro, longtime alderman there.
It's a flip-flop since we last checked in.
A veteran Chicago police sergeant. He has now fallen behind C.B. Johnson, his challenger, Mr. C.B. Johnson, with a 110-vote lead. That's another nail-biter, but Talaferro falling behind. That may not be a good sign.
And Mike, we're going to take a break from the aldermanic races to check back in with the mayor, and it looks like Johnson is widening his lead.
Widening his lead, and this is, again, this comes on top of that expectation that Paul Vallis needed to have a lead tonight for those, in order to withstand the expected strength that Brandon Johnson's going to show when all the mail-in ballots are counted. Again, Mr. Vallis, with each new update, seems to fall a little bit further behind here. The margin now about 3,800 votes.
And this is 90% reporting.
Yeah.
Again, not counting the mail-in ballots, all of them anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to those wards if we can. I think we kind of split it down the middle there. We've got 14 total that we're going through that are contested in this particular election.
This is the 30th Ward on the near northwest side. Ruth Cruz holding on to that lead, 4 percentage points over Jessica Gutierrez, the daughter of the former, the first Hispanic member of the Illinois delegation in the U.S. Congress, former House member Luis Gutierrez. And
so we're
4 points.
Yeah, 100% reporting at this point in time. Let's move on now to the next ward if we can. And this is the 36th ward, Mike.
Yep, Gil Villegas, the longtime chair of the Hispanic caucus in the city council, he seems to, he's got a pretty substantial lead. That one looks like it's perhaps over. Lenore Torres-Witt, a member of the Chicago Teachers Union's Executive Council. I'm sure that Brandon Johnson was pulling for Ms. Witt to win this seat. The Teachers Union making a bid to also take control of a large portion of the city council. They may fall short here, according to these numbers.
All right, just a few more to go here. The 43rd ward, Mike.
Yeah, Lincoln Park. Brian Comer trailing. He was the president of the Sheffield Neighbors Association, an active group in that community. Behind the appointed alderman that Mayor Lightfoot appointed, Timmy Knudsen. That one also a substantial 4-point margin there.
And 96% reporting so far.
Right.
Let's move on to the 45th ward and 100% of the votes in.
Up on the far northwest side. Sure looks good for Alderman Jim Gardner, despite all the controversies up there. You know, he was accused of various of misusing and abusing the power of the office to bully some people in the neighborhood, but the neighborhood seems to be sending him back to the city council by a wide margin. All
right, and now we're going to move on to the 46th ward.
The uptown neighborhood along the North Lakefront, Angela Clay, that she would likely be a vote in the city council for Brandon Johnson's initiatives. She's got a significant lead, a 10-point lead over Kim Walls.
All right,
and then in the 48th ward, up in the Edgewater neighborhood on the North Lakefront, just north of 46, Lenny Mana Hoppenworth, a photographer in the neighborhood. She's got a small lead. It appears to be about 70 votes over Joe Dunn, a housing developer, a low-cost and an affordable housing developer, but it's 50-50. That one we may wait for all the votes to come in.
All right, I want to circle back to the Naperville mayoral race because this is another one that we've been watching that could have a historic outcome. It looks like right now we're looking at 53% to 45%, and then there's a third candidate who has 3% of the vote. And talk a little bit about Benny White. He's leading right now with 40. I should have said this differently. Benny White is leading with 53% of the vote, and then Scott, is it Worrell?
Grant Worley.
Former
Republican state rep,
leading with, or I'm sorry, in second place with 45% of the vote, and this could have some really
special.
How much is in? You know what? I'm not seeing a total of how much is reporting at this point.
So Benny White, who's been a member of the Naperville City Council for several years now, retired military. I think he was a lieutenant colonel. He's got a doctorate from, I think, Benedictine, and he would be the first black mayor of Naperville, which has been growing like a mushroom after the spring rain, and he's got a significant lead here.
So again, it looks like he's got 53% of the vote and Worley with 45%. But again, that's for Naperville mayor, so that's another race we continue to watch. And
right.
I understand we have
Matt Podgorski?
Yes, your special guest is here.
So Matt, if we see your whiteboard there, if you hear us, Matt Podgorski. So for the first time tonight, Paul Vallis has fallen behind Brandon Johnson by about 3,800 votes. What's your sense of things?
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. There's no sugarcoating it. It doesn't look great for Paul Vallis right now, with only 10% of the precincts not reporting, plus the uncounted vote by mail. It's not mathematically over yet. There is always the outside possibility that a good chunk of those 10% precincts that aren't reported are coming from the 41st and the 19th wards, where Paul Vallis is running 70 to 80%. But barring some statistical anomaly like that, it's not looking great. In fact, I think the last dump we had of votes, Brandon picked up I think 2,000 or 3,000 votes, which means it must have come from areas where he's doing much stronger. So. Yeah, it's not looking great if you're Paul Vallis right now. Crazier things have happened. Nobody should concede the race at this point, but yeah, it's not looking great.
So you think that it's likely not to be a concession tonight? Although you'd have no way of knowing that, but you know, would you, if you were talking to Paul Vallis, would you advise him to hang in there till all the votes are counted?
Yeah, I'd probably hang in there and at least wait till tomorrow and get an idea from the Board of Elections of an estimate of how many ballots still haven't been processed. Because as we mentioned, this number is it's 48,000 is an estimate. So it's hard to say. And, you know, I just had to make one small point. I was watching your guys' program and I heard a spokesman for Brandon Johnson, the senator,
Senator Peters, one of his most outspoken cheerleaders.
Yeah, we need to bring everybody together, and Brandon Johnson does that. And then he was insulting conservatives and Paul Vallis after the polls have already closed. Not a very good start if he's going to be a spokesman of the Johnson campaign of this being a moment of healing, because I'm one of those conservatives who lives in Chicago he's talking about. So I don't feel warm and welcome right now at all from that senator. So not a great start. I think you should realize the campaign's over. There's no more undecided voters, and you know, start focusing on public service.
So let me ask you, Matt, that on that whiteboard behind you, there was that number that we started a couple hours ago, 90 minutes ago. You pointed to how Vallis would have liked to have a lead of 19,000 and change. Unfortunately for him, he's about 3,800 in the hole right now.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, this thing is obviously not going to happen right now. I went back and, you know, recalculated what a better case scenario would be for these 48,000 votes. And that's if, you know, let's say there's only 35,000 votes that'll come back, and maybe he'll only lose them, you know, 55-45 or 60-40. And then he'll only need to be up by, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 votes. But, you know, he's trailing right now. So he really needs this last 10% of precincts to come in from really, really strong areas like 19th Ward and 41st Ward.
Yeah. And I want to get back to what you just said, because it was very powerful. And Mike and I were speaking about this earlier. You know, you don't run into many people who say, this is who I voted for. And, you know, it's mostly, this is who I voted for. And if they don't win, that's it. You know, the city's going to, you know what, in a handbasket. I mean, so we have people that are very strong about who they voted for, a lot of support for each candidate. And it is going to be hard, I think, that unification process moving forward, regardless of who wins at this point.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, it's like elections are one thing, right? You sort of get a pass politically on things you say and do during campaigns, right or wrong. But you know, when the polls close, it comes down to remembering that you're serving the public. You're a public servant. You're not a dictator. And I really hope if Brandon Johnson wins, or whoever ends up winning, and all these 26 majority aldermen, remember that this is still a democracy, and you have to represent all the people. And that means you're representing the Green Party, the Republican Party, the Democrats, the Independents, and even those folks we talked about, Mike and Natalie, who don't vote. You represent everybody. And so just because, you know, the 41st Ward didn't go for you, Brandon Johnson, you still have to treat the 41st Ward like you would your own personal ward in your own backyard. So hopefully they'll remember that. We're all Chicagoans, and we're all Americans.
Yeah, you would ask that of anyone. What do you think Brandon Johnson's campaign did right? I know you touched on this about an hour and a half ago, but let's talk about it again. What do you think they did right? Now, of course, he had the built-in support from the teachers union, but what else do you think helped him?
I think it was as simple as they turned a moderate Democrat into a far right-wing Republican. I think the city has become so progressive that if you're a moderate Democrat, you can make the case that they're actually a conservative Republican and don't share Chicago values. I think they hit them hard, and I don't think it was totally fair, but negative advertising works, and I think enough of it stuck to where it chipped away enough at the white vote from Paul Vallis. Paul Vallis will have ended up winning the white vote only by about 10% when he really needed it to win it by more like 15 or 20%. So I think it was just the negative advertising, the constant pounding on him about social issues and party affiliation and all that other divisive stuff.
So let me ask you, Matt. I know that we talked about not making a call here, not pushing you to make a call. I know you talk sometimes to another consultant, a young man I quoted a few minutes ago, Frank Calabrese. He tells me, he texted me a few minutes ago, Brandon Johnson wins. Your thoughts about people making that call?
Yeah, I mean, you can, right? You can extrapolate and do that. I wouldn't recommend making the call yet because we do have assumptions around what this number is and what the breaking is either way. I don't think it's super risky to make that call. I just definitely wouldn't do that yet. There's just too many votes uncounted and too many unknowns at this point. But Frank's a smart guy. He's usually pretty good with this analysis, but I just think it's a little bit premature.
All right. Thanks very much. Let's show the numbers once again, Matt. And Brandon Johnson, for the first time tonight with this update, he has taken the lead. And in contrast to that number that Matt Podgorski said Paul Vallis could go to sleep feeling comfortable about, a 19,000 vote lead, he's right now trailing by a little less than 4,000. So not looking good at this point. It's certainly not where Paul Vallis wanted to be. And for Brandon Johnson, he is absolutely looking pretty good at this point. And we just got a little bit of water here. I'm going to take a swig.
Yeah, Mike, you get a drink of water there. I mean, we're looking at 90% of the votes reporting. But again, as Mike and I keep reminding you, we still have those mail-in ballots that people can still drop in the mailbox as long as it's postmarked by this evening. Will still be counted. And the Board of Elections has until April 18th to count all of those ballots. So we could be waiting. Mike, in the days to come, how is this going to work? So is the Board of Elections each day going to release a result of here are the ballots that we've counted today and here's which way they go? So it's kind of a drip, drip, drip effect?
Yes. So the ballots that arrived in the mail today are not in these totals. They will be counted tomorrow along with the mail-in ballots that arrive tomorrow. So that'll be a pretty big number. And the expectation is that a large majority of the mail ballots will have arrived by this weekend, certainly by next Tuesday, within a week. By the time you get into that second week, you get ballots that arrive by April 18th will still be counted as long as they're postmarked as of today. And
I understand we have Max Bever with the Board of Elections joining us now, and he can even more thoroughly answer the question that I just asked Mike. So Max, what I just asked Mike was, after today, how are we going to be seeing these results? Are you going to be sending us an email saying, here are the number of ballots that we got today, the mail-in ballots, and this is how they've been divvied up to the candidates? What's that going to look like in the days ahead?
That's right. And I know that's the question on everybody's mind, but we will be publicly releasing the data on how many vote-by-mail ballots we receive back each day, what's getting scanned, what's getting processed, what's getting counted, and ultimately what's getting uploaded to the unofficial results moving forward. As Mike was probably just saying, we do have until April 18th as the election code deadline to receive all properly postmarked but late arriving vote-by-mail ballots. And as of last night, we had over 91,000 outstanding vote-by-mail ballots still. We don't expect all of those ballots to come back. And if we look at February 28th, just the last election, for any type of guidance, we went into that election with 100,000 vote-by-mail ballots still outstanding. And in the 2 weeks from Election Day and then those 2 weeks after, we received just over 52,000 of those back. So I imagine that we'll have a pretty similar return rate for this time around, too, which means that could be between 45,000 to 47,000 vote-by-mail ballots arriving back over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
So given how close, I'm sorry?
I said that's very significant.
It is. And given how close this race is, I imagine that these campaigns will be watching these results come in day by day. Now, the Board of Elections, we do not officially call the races until all votes are counted. So it won't be until after that April 18th date.
So
we technically actually have until April 25th to proclaim the results. We will try to get that done quicker. But we do have these 2 weeks where we have to count all these vote-by-mail ballots, as well as provisional ballots that were cast today.
So let me ask you, this number that's up on our screen says 90% of the vote in. Where is the missing 10%? Do you have a sense of that? Is it south, west? Is it north?
Not at this point. Precincts do take a little bit of time to 100% report back. Usually we see about 98% of precincts reporting by 11 p.m. tonight. I have a feeling these results will continue to update over the next few hours. So continually check up over at chicagoelections.gov. more precincts will be reporting as they officially get back their results.
You're probably going to be breaking the internet with that web address because people are going to be checking so frequently. Max, talk a little bit about voter.
I think we've had a new update here.
Oh, we do. Okay, stay with us, Max, because we have more questions for you.
Brandon Johnson's lead now 2 percentage points, and he's
92% reporting, Mike.
7,100 votes with 92 in. Mm-hmm. Okay, and once again, things coming up roses for Brandon Johnson since the beginning of the evening, as more votes have come in, every new posting of results has gone Johnson's way.
Okay, so Max, let's talk about voter turnout. How did it compare to the initial mayoral election?
It turned out to be very similar to February 28th. While we had a very swift and strong early voting over the last 2 weeks, as well as a surprising amount of vote-by-mail ballots coming back, just because they started shipping on March 18th. So many voters were using our secure drop boxes and getting them back to the board very quickly. Turns out we had a pretty slow and sleepy election day, very similar to the election day that we had just on February 28th. So as of tonight, we just had over 520,000 ballots cast for just over a 33% citywide turnout. Now, those numbers are going to go up as those vote-by-mail ballots continue to come back, as well as provisional ballots, which will likely raise it a couple more percentage points, as well as more ballots cast by the time we get done with that.
And what age block did you see voting the most?
You know, compared to February 28th, it really evened out with the number of voters that we had. The February 28th election was definitely driven by more voters aged 55 and up. What was really surprising and interesting to see was voters aged 35 to 44 really turned out more this time comparatively to February 28th. So from ages 25 to 74, it really evened out for a lot of those totals. It was ages 18 to 24 that had a similar turnout to February 28th, with nearly 4% of the ballots cast. That is a stubborn number with youth turnout when it comes to municipal elections that we would like to see improve for the future.
Well, and Mike, that really speaks to what he just said there, Brandon Johnson's lead, in a way, doesn't it? Capturing some of that younger vote.
Yes, and there were reports of teachers, members of the teachers union, taking high school kids, getting them registered, and having them cast ballots, which was politically a smart thing since the younger voter is much more likely to support Brandon Johnson.
And Max, did anything surprise you with this particular runoff?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the most surprising thing was that we did have a very large amount of voters that were motivated to get out early, as well as to get their vote-by-mail ballots back. They broke some records as of last night. We had 30,000 people early vote all in one day. What is becoming clear is that we've got basically a pool of the same amount of municipal voters. So less people showing up on election day, more people showing up to early vote and vote by mail. But really what was interesting to see comparatively to February 28th was to see these age groups more evenly across the city rather than be driven by older voters.
And any problems at the polls that people should be aware of before we let you go?
Very few that we were aware of. A lower turnout on election day usually means that we're having less problems or less voter complaints. We only had 14 polling places that had delayed openings from 6 a.m., but they were all open before 7 a.m. Taking a look at our Election Central Help Desk, I'm not really seeing anything, no poll closures or anything that would have thrown any ward or precinct out of whack.
Well, you've got a big job ahead. I'll tell you that much. And I don't know that I'd want to be you, Max, in the coming days.
Indeed. I'm sure I'll be talking to a lot of you over the next coming 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. We've got you on speed dial. So, we'll send you that Zoom link 2 or 3 times a day.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Max,
Mike.
for your time.
Thanks. And you know what? And thank all of your colleagues, too. Being an election worker, especially at the precinct level these days and elsewhere in the system, is not always a thankful task. It's not always a task that gets the credit that it deserves. And I, for one, am glad that your colleagues are out there counting the votes.
Well, thank you very much. I'll pass along the kind words. It is hard work, but we do enjoy it too.
All right, thanks so much. My mom, by the way, is an election judge in Sangamon County, not in Cook County. So,
well, thank
but
her
yeah,
too.
I will. I know it's a very long day for those folks. So thanks so much, Max.
Thank you.
All right.
Let's circle back to these numbers, Mike, shall we?
Yeah,
All right.
Let's show, I think we've had them up on the screen. Brandon Johnson now's got that 2 percentage point lead. And once again, it's worth recalling that because Johnson is expected to do well in the 40 or 50,000, 40 or 47,000 vote by mail ballots that are still out there, the fact that he has a lead now in the minds has some people already calling him the winner tonight. We are not yet doing that, but some folks are saying Brandon Johnson has won this thing and is likely to be the next mayor of Chicago. Okay, so we have two colleagues who we're going to check back in on, not right now, but on Fox 32 News at 9. Nate Rogers is following the Brandon Johnson campaign, and Dane Placco is following the Paul Vallis campaign. When we checked back in with Nate not too long ago, he was as there was a sense of excitement in the air at Johnson camppain headquarters. Triumphant. Yes, because of these results. We saw Senator Robert Peters there being positively triumphant, and as Matt Podgorski observed, taking some shots at Paul Vallis. I suspect we won't see Brandon Johnson do that later tonight or whenever he might come out to make a statement. And so we will be watching if any of those statements take place. We've got our teams in place for you. We're going to have continuing updates online and coming up for you on Fox 32 News at 9. Let's take one last look at the numbers if we can before we go. We want to see where we left off here, Mike. Yep. The 7,000 vote lead, 7,100, almost 7,200 vote lead for Brandon Johnson, with 92, is that percent in? Mm-hmm, correct. And, still very, very close. We're going to take a break, and we will be back, Natalie. That's right. We're going to be back right here live We're going to be back here live on Fox 32 News at 9 o'clock with all of our reporters at those campaign headquarters, and you can see the excitement for yourself. We'll see you then.